Hello, fellow truthers. I'm David Ravel, and this is Value Sign for Tuesday, February 22nd. For all of our articles and podcasts, visit valuesign.com. Today, the inflation mindset. Just ahead. The last time we had an economy like this was the 1970s, and as luck would have it, I was a cub broker just starting out on my career. Back then, we were paid strictly on commission, and as I didn't have many clients, I wasn't making much money. But while my income was not climbing, my expenses certainly were. The cost of living steadily increased, and I soon found it harder and harder to make ends meet. I have a feeling that's what's happening to many of us today. So I offer this as sort of a guide on what we can expect ahead if the economy continues on this course. Now, the easiest thing to do is to simply borrow to maintain that lifestyle we've become accustomed to. I know, that's exactly what I did. When we started out, credit card interest wasn't too bad, so just put things on the plastic, I thought, tied myself over until times get better again. If I have only one thing that you hear today, please try to avoid to the extent you can any extra borrowing. Credit cards, home loans, student loans, it doesn't matter. Try to avoid them all. Because there are a couple of things that we know about loans. First, those banks and lending companies are pretty aggressive in wanting to get their cash back. Don't mess with them. They can ruin your credit and thereby cut off any future loans you might want. Okay, you've probably already knew that. But there's another dimension at work here. During a time of rising inflation like we're in now, these same banks are going to start raising their interest rates. Forget that the Federal Reserve tells you that interest rates are at less than 1%. The bogey for the banks is 7.5%. That's the current inflation rate, and that's the minimum that the banks will want to make on their loans. So it's 7.5% plus their fees and profit margins that the banks are going to want to charge you. And you can see that we're easily into double digits as the credit card fee and consumer loan fees of all kinds that you're going to start seeing shortly. So as your loan balances increase, the payments on those loan balances will increase even more because the banks inevitably are going to raise their interest rates to cover that inflation rate. Unfortunately, you're not alone in experiencing these higher loan costs. Everyone up and down your street will likely get hit with the higher interest rates. Grocers like retail shops purchase their inventory primarily through loans also, and they're called inventory loans. And sure as we're sitting here, the cost of those loans are also going to go higher. Hence the cost of food, clothing, and all the retail things we're buying are also going up. Not just because they're becoming more expensive to produce, which they are, but also because they're becoming more expensive to put in inventory and finance, and then sell to you and me. And it's not just the small mom-and-pop shops who will have this problem. Large companies are also going to go through the same thing. I often like to point to Home Depot as one of the best, most well-managed retailers in the nation. But it's also one of the most highly leveraged, which, if I recall, has more than 90% of its capital through borrowing which carries the inventory in their stores, but borrowing which also now may come at a higher cost. Anyway, that's supposed to be the way things worked, and it certainly was the way things worked back in the 1970s. But if I'm being entirely honest, that may not be how things are working today in 2022. In 2022, there are really becoming two economies, and if I'm at all correct about this, the two economies are about to take two very different paths. The first economy is the economy for you and I. We're definitely entering a high inflation period. Actually, we're already there. And you and I are going to have this hit like a ton of bricks. Prices will definitely go up, but our income may not. And the cost of borrowing is also going higher and higher. However, it's an entirely open question about whether the upper echelon of the economy will bear that same burden. Oh, sure, They'll buy their groceries and retail goods just like all of us, and the price of those items are definitely going higher. But the cost of finance for the top level may also rise, but may not. At least so far, it has not risen. Now, you've probably noticed the extreme reluctance of the Federal Reserve to raise interest rates. Any talk by the Fed of hiking rates is immediately met by a tantrum up on Wall Street. Markets swoon, dropping a few hundred points, and the Fed immediately backs down on any plan to raise rates. And we're not talking about raising rates very much. Right now, rates are fully 7% below the inflation rate. And that's not really fighting inflation. In fact, it's creating inflation. We are living through one of the highest periods of monetary stimulus of all time, and we're still there. In fact, it's far greater than the 1970s. The Fed is simply pouring the gas on the inflationary fires to keep rates this low. So who, you may ask, can borrow at those low rates that the Fed is promoting? Answer, Wall Street, and those same people who are screaming every time the Fed talks about raising their interest rates. Also, large corporations who are big borrowers also get those very low preferred rates. So my earlier example of Home Depot is likely not really to be the case right now. Home Depot, Apple Computer, Tesla, and all the big names that you know about are most likely borrowing at levels that you and I can only dream about. When this will change, or even if it will change, is an open question, and it's squarely centered on the Federal Reserve and its policies. I could go into an open rant about how politicized the Fed is right now and the undue influence that Washington holds over the Federal Reserve, but I'll save that for another time. Suffice it to say that right now we are creating a two-tier economy, as in so many ways we're creating a two-tier society. On the top are those who have accumulated vast sums and are able to leverage that even further with their incredible low cost of borrowing. While here, in retail land, we're facing no doubt higher interest rates on what we borrow, as well as inflation-driven higher prices on the things we purchase. It is indeed a two-tier economy. It's been a shaky overnight ride for stock futures as tensions over Ukraine continue to mount. Russia has now recognized two separatist regions in the country, raising fears that an invasion is now imminent. The result has been that U.S. stock futures dropped over 300 points earlier, while the price of oil rallied 4% at one point to a level not seen since back in 2014. In economic news today, we will get the latest on real estate prices, expected to continue their rise. For the past 12 months, real estate here in the U.S. has risen roughly 17 or 18%, depending on which index you're watching. It's a dramatic indication of the effects of inflation. So leading in earnings reports today is our old friend Home Depot, that highly leveraged home improvement store we were just talking about. Also on the calendar is Medtronics, the large medical devices company, and Public Storage, everyone's favorite place to put their overflow. And that's the value side for Tuesday, February 22nd. For all of our podcasts and blog posts, visit valueside.com. I'm David Ravel. ValueSide is independently written and researched. These views expressed are strictly my own.